An ex-military police officer was investigating an issue at the edge of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. He witnessed something not human. 3 voices from Alaska's freezing darkness, and 3 stories that never made it into any official report. Welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. Now prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. Snow, silence, and the long Alaskan darkness, where the lights of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson end, Chugach country begins. An ex-military police officer breaks years of silence to tell you what patrols witnessed there: strange sightings, footprints, and voices. He says they tracked it, but they were never able to trap it. If you've heard of anything similar or have any idea what this might be, please leave it in the comments below. Thank you for giving me a place to send this. I haven't put this down anywhere official, and I never told my family. I was a military police officer at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage from 2016 to 2019. I handled plenty of normal calls: DUIs at the gate, moose in housing, noise complaints. The calls I'm writing about came from the east side, where baseland touches Chugach State Park and the National Forest. Range roads, comms shacks, trailheads that go quiet after sunset. I'll stick to what I saw and what I heard. No guesses. The first call was late October 2017. First snow had crusted over mud along the Powerline Trail spur. The air was in the high teens, wind steady, sky low and gray. Range control asked us to check an alarm ping at a remote equipment shed above the hillside neighborhoods. I was with another patrol, a younger guy on field training. We drove up the gravel until we had to walk. Our breath moved straight up in the beam of our lights. No animal sounds, no traffic noise, just a low crackle from the power lines. The shed was standing, but the door hung on a single hinge. Inside, cable reels and a fuse box. No sign of theft. Fresh marks were on the door frame, 4 parallel gouges spaced evenly, deep into the wood. The top of the highest gouge was above my head. I am 6 feet. The snow outside held tracks that were wrong. The steps were long and direct, heel to toe, then toe only, then nothing. The stride measured longer than any man I have seen up there. No splay like a bear, no double print. Each step compressed to solid ice. We followed until the prints led into low alder. Something had hung pieces of fresh hide from branches with raw twine. Rabbit. 5 pieces spaced in a circle. The wind shifted and I caught a sick sweet smell, not rot and not musk. My trainee went wide-eyed. He asked if this was some kind of ritual. I said we would note it and call it in. Then a voice from the tree line said my last name. Calm. Same tone my shift sergeant used on the radio. It repeated my name, then my rank. I keyed my radio and got only a hiss. My partner said it again before I could answer. We are being watched. We backed out slowly. No rush. I told range control it was likely vandalism and bear scratches, which is the phrase they prefer. On the way down, we found a small cairn balanced dead center on the trail. 7 flat stones, thin as plates, each one smaller than the last. No tracks around it. It was not there on our way up. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Second call was mid-December. Deep cold, single digits, aurora out in weak bands. We staged off Arctic Valley Road before it closed to the public. A hiker had phoned in screams from the South Fork Eagle River area, past the bridge toward the lakes. State Park rangers said they would sweep their side at first light. Range control wanted us to check our boundary. Snow was powder over ice. There was a light metallic smell in the air that stung the back of my throat. Every sound carried too far. Even the click of my safety felt loud. We found the first blood at a fence break. A clean line across the top wire and a smear down the post. Drops in the snow tracked in a straight path toward the river. We followed. The drops became a spray, then a heavy drag, then nothing at the river's edge where fragile ice moved in slow patches. You could see open black water between lace and crust. The trail ended there. No hole in the ice, no break, no sign of an entry. I took photos and called it in. While we waited for wildlife, something moved behind us. Not footsteps. A weight shift on frozen brush. Then a click, hard and dry, repeated 3 times from 3 different positions. I tried our talk-around channel and got a full signal with dead silence. Then my radio picked up a whisper that did not pass through the speaker cone the way a normal transmission does. This one felt thin and close to my ear. It said, "Come here." It used my name again. Then it used my partner's. Exact pronunciation. Exact inflection. He started to answer. I grabbed his sleeve and shook my head. We went still. A shape crouched near the tree line 20 yards out. I saw it between 2 spruces. It did not blend with anything around it. It did not sway with the trees or align with the trunks. It was narrow at the waist and long in the torso. The elbows hung below the knees. When it turned its head, there was a reflection at the eyes that was not animal green or red. It flashed pale, almost white, then dimmed. The mouth opened and held, too wide for the lower face. Teeth were visible in a ring even when the jaw stilled. No steam from the mouth in that cold. That absence bothered me more than the teeth. We raised our rifles and gave the commands. It stayed crouched. Then it shifted in a way I have trouble putting into words because the joints did not move with the sequence I know. The knees bent the wrong way. The shoulders folded. It covered the distance between 2 trees without a step I could see. We fired 1 warning. The shape slid back into the line and vanished. No crash through branches. No snow, shakedown. The place was just empty again. Wildlife officers showed up with 2 men I did not recognize. Clean beards, dark parkas, no state patch, no base badge. They told us to hand over our SD cards and logbooks for consolidated incident reporting. One of them had an evidence kit, but no chain of custody labels. He swabbed the doorframe gouges we had photographed and the blood at the fence. He labeled each vial with a number we were not allowed to copy. They told me to rewrite my report with the heading, "Bear activity adjacent to boundary." They used that phrase exactly. Range control closed the area for 1 week for safety. The call logs for our shift would not load for the next 2 months. Anytime I asked, I got a delay or a new password. I started asking around quietly. The older guys knew stories. They used the word Nantinak, which I had heard in relation to Port Chatham on the Kenai, far from us, but still Alaska. One conservation officer said the Dena'ina elders are taught not to answer your name if you hear it from the trees. A ranger with the state park said hikers disappear at a steady clip on the South Fork. He said that off the record and then changed the subject. The 3rd call was early March 2018. Breakup had not started yet. Still hard crust in the mornings, glare ice on the roads, blue daylight that fades fast. A comms alarm triggered at a relay up near Powerline Pass. The same shed from October, but it had a new door. The door was once again open. Inside was clean except for charcoal marks on a plywood panel nailed to the back wall. The marks formed a circle with a pentagram and 3 straight lines across it and a small square off to the side. The square had a dot inside. It was deliberate. I stepped outside to radio it in. The air went dead again. The only sound was power line buzz and a low thump I felt more than I heard. I scanned with thermal. The screen picked up a human-sized heat shape standing on the cut under the lines about 50 yards out. The head was too narrow for the shoulders. The arms hung too long. The heat signature pulsed in a slow pattern that did not match breathing. It turned toward me and my radio hissed, and it said my name in a whisper. I felt the hair on my arms lift. I thought, we are being hunted. The thing moved without bounce or recoil. One frame it stood near the pole base, then next frame it was halfway to us. I shouted. My partner came out, saw my screen, and swore. The thing took 2 more pulses forward and then crouched. I saw an open mouth, and it was dark inside. I did not see a tongue. The teeth were long and thin. I fired center mass. The thermal bloom blew out the frame, and when it cooled, the spot was empty. We advanced to the last position. No prints, no drag, only 2 small pits where something hard had touched down. That night, someone tapped on the side of my house on base housing at 3:11 and again at 3:17. 6 taps each time. I stepped onto the porch with my sidearm and a flashlight. The motion light came on. The yard showed fresh tracks that started in the middle of the grass and ended at the same point. I measured the stride. Too long for me. No heel. A direct push down with no edges. I didn't chase it. 2 days later, those same unmarked men came back. They wanted the plywood panel with the symbol on it. They told my commander the door scratches were from a brown bear. They said the blood was moose. I asked for the lab and the report number. They told me I was not cleared for it. After that, Range Control removed the public incident map we used to cross-check wildlife calls. They told us to refer all east side alarms to a new environmental contractor first. The contractor trucks had out-of-state plates. Before I rotated out in 2019, I drove up to Flat Top on my own at dusk. I parked before the lot and walked the power line cut down toward the valley. No wind, no birds. I whistled once and waited. I know what the elders say about that. I wanted to hear what answered. I heard 6 hard clicks in a triangle around me. Then a woman's voice called my first name from the brush, and it used the voice of someone I knew on base. I walked back to my truck without turning my back to the brush, completely freaked out. I believe the stories the locals share because I saw the pieces that line up with their stories. I'm in the lower 48 now, but I still wake up sometimes because I hear my name spoken in a voice that belongs to someone else. North Slope, dead of winter, diesel hum, sodium lights, and a long black run of pipe. A man from an oil crew writes in with a simple line. Something walked into their trailer, speaking in a voice that wasn't normal. It came back the next night, then the night after. And that's when hands went missing from roll call. I worked maintenance on remote oil lines in Alaska from 2014 to 2020. We moved between small pipeline sites and pump station camps. You sleep in a box, you eat in a box, then you step out into nothing but wind, lights, and tundra. We were on the North Slope when this happened. Late January. No sun, just a long dusk that never lifts. The air was in the -20s with ice fog low to the ground. Our crew was 8 people. I bunked in a 2-wide trailer with my coworker Bo. Good hand, quiet. He knew valves and heaters better than anyone. The first night, it was 2240. We had just checked glycol, signed the log, and were heating food on the hot plate. The wind rattled the skirt panels under the trailer. Then the door opened. Not a knock, just the latch, smooth and slow. A man stepped inside. No badge, no frost on his parka, no ice on his beard. That last part bothered me. Everyone up there blows steam when they walk in from the dark, and he didn't. He stood just inside the mudroom, looking our way and moving his jaw in a small twitch. His eyes jerked side to side, but not together. One lagged behind. He said something that I thought was Russian at first, short, hard syllables with a click between them. Then he switched to English and asked for coffee, but he didn't shape the words right, like he learned them from a damaged tape. He kept glancing at the clock and then at the floor like something was coming. Bo told him he needed a badge. The man nodded too many times in a row. He started saying names. He said my last name and Bo's. Then he said our night lead's name. We never wear names in the trailer. He smiled when he saw our faces. His lips didn't match the smile. It stopped short of his eyes. His jaw ticked. I told him he needed to step outside. I reached for the radio and he flinched. Not fear, more like he recognized the radio and didn't like it. He whispered something with that click in it and turned his head in a full pivot without moving his shoulders and ran away. We chased after him onto the pad. The noise from the generator and the wind took everything after 5 steps. No footprints past the first set. The snow was crusted. Our boots broke the surface. His didn't. He was just gone. The next morning, the day boss rolled in and we told him what happened. He told us to fill out a near miss for an unauthorized person. That night, the man came back. Same hour, same slow door. This time, he stood closer. His cheeks were wet. He held his hands in front of him. They shook fast, not shivering, more like a current going through him. He said he had eaten with us before in this very creepy tone. He asked if the pipe ran quiet this week, and then said a string of numbers that matched a pressure readout we had argued about that afternoon. He took one step, and his knee didn't bend right. It swung and then set. He looked at Bo and said, "Your motor is going to stop at 216. He used those exact words. Then he said, "The little man will be in your bed by then." He looked at me and said, "You left the wrench under the heater." Then he pressed 2 fingers against the inside of his throat and made a wet, choking sound. He watched our faces while he did it. He smiled. Bo stepped forward with a wrench in hand. The man's head tilted. He said a word that sounded twisted. I've heard guys from Nuiksut and Kaktovik talk. They told stories during meals. He was copying the shape of the sounds, but dropping the breath where it belonged. He backed out of the door very slow, still facing us. He smiled again. All the bottom teeth were dark along the gums. He ran. Same thing. We chased, but no prints past the first run. At 0216, the backup generator hiccuped and died for 3 seconds. Bo and I stared at each other until it caught and came back. On my bunk pillow, someone had set a hand-sized wad of insulation torn from the crawl space. No one else had a key. That freaked both me and Bo out even more so than the guy's eyes. Day 3, the day boss called and we told him what happened. He asked that we do a safety stand-down. The HSE lead maid said we would need to sign a fresh NDA. This isn't normal for a trespass incident. He said the state troopers were notified and would swing by, but they never did. Instead, 2 men in clean Carhartts with no patches came in around noon. Not company, not state. They asked about the first 2 nights and recorded us. They wanted times and details of the incident. Then they walked the yard without parkas for 20 minutes in -28. It was so strange. Night 3. The man came back, but this time the door was locked. He started banging on the door. There was this smell of antifreeze. I opened the door. He had a twitch running through him. His jaw ticked hard. He whispered under it like he was coaching himself. He asked to see our hands. He kept asking, "Show me your small hands." He said it 4 times. He held a glove in his left hand. It was one of ours. We keep extras in a bin. Someone had taken a fresh pair and turned the fingers inside out, then tied the fingers in a knot at the tips. He set it on the table and tapped each finger in order, naming them with a word that didn't make sense. Then he said the names of 2 men not on shift that night. He said where they slept and which bunks. He kept looking at the clock on the wall. He stood there until the second hand ticked to the top and then snapped his eyes to us. The whites showed all the way around. The pupils didn't match in size. He said, "You won't hear them leave." The next morning, both men he named missed breakfast. Their room was cold. Sheets pulled, boots on the floor, parkas hanging. No footprints in the hallway, no prints outside their door. They did find tracks downrange past the light plant where the snow drifts up against the fence. Bare footprints, heels deep, toes spread. The prints stopped at the fence, not at the gate. Just stopped. We lined up along the pad with radios and rifles while the day boss talked into the sat phone and kept glancing at the office door. No troopers, no helicopters. The two unmarked men came back again and said they found out that the missing crewman had flown out on short notice for medical, but there was nothing on the sign-out sheet. No signatures. They assured us everything was okay, and those prints must not have been theirs. That night, we had security. That night the man came back, but not through the door. He spoke through it, and we could hear his lips touch the metal. It made a small tack sound. He said my full name, first and middle, then my mother's first name. I haven't used my middle name since I was a kid, and my mother passed away years ago. He giggled once. It sounded like a cough cut off with a swallow. I put my hand on the lock and my stomach went sideways. I felt a draft coming up from the floor vent under the table. I got on my knees and looked into the vent with my flashlight. A face moved out of the dark under the trailer and looked up at me through the grate. Same eyes, not matching, too wide. The mouth opened very slow. The tongue was pale and narrow. It said my name again, not through the vent, but inside my left ear. The face smiled and showed long, thin teeth. I jumped back and knocked the chair over. Bo grabbed the grate with gloved hands and ripped it up. There was no one under there, just frost and dirty insulation. Something had crawled around under the trailer and left a smooth track through the frost like a big eel. No knee marks, no handprints. Security didn't see or hear anything. I told the boss we were being hunted. He said, "Don't say that on radio." He sent us in pairs to check valve boxes for tampering. I opened VB06 and found half-frozen meat pushed between the lines. Not from a rabbit or caribou. The cut edge was clean and square. Someone had jammed it in there to mess with the heat. A smear of blood ran down the inside panel and formed a word I don't to repeat. It was a single word that asked for something no man should ask for. When I showed Bo, he shut the door and said we were done for the night. He said we needed to go home. He was shaking. By day 5, 4 people from 3 crews had disappeared. 2 from ours, 1 from a neighboring weld team, 1 electrician. The official word was transfers, an early rotation. We all knew that was not true. The empty bunks were cold. The safety board went blank for 2 days, which never happens. Then a corporate email arrived with phrases that didn't fit. Abundance of caution, wildlife mitigation, temporary reduction in force. The 2 unmarked men took the DVR from our cameras, and they told the cook to stop calling the night meals mid-rats and to say late dinner instead. On night 5, the man didn't come inside. He called on the radio with my day boss's voice and told us to meet him at the spare parts Connex. He used the channel we reserved for emergency. He said, "Bring the small hands." Then he laughed. Bo looked at me and shook his head. We contacted security immediately, and we went to see. The Connex was open. A row of wrenches hung on the pegboard by the door, all turned the same direction. Someone had drawn a circle in pink flagging paint on the floor. In the circle, a hard hat sat upside down with something inside it. I lifted the brim and saw a tongue. It had the little strings that anchor the bottom. It looked gray-blue from the cold. I put the hat back down and stepped away. My legs went weak. We heard boots on packed snow right outside the door, not running, just a steady rhythm. We raised our flashlights and caught a human outline through the gap. The head bent too far forward, chin low enough to touch the collarbone. The man spoke in 2 voices at once, one high and slow, one low and flat. The words didn't match. The door handle turned and ticked. The walls flexed. A line of claws, or a tool, scraped across the steel and left 5 marks deep enough to show light through. The whole Connex gave a dry moan. I'm not proud of this, but I yelled for it to stop in a cracked voice. The noise stopped, dead still. We stayed put until we heard the generator autocycle to night load. When we opened the door, the yard was empty. Fresh snow had started. No prints. The 5 gouges ran parallel across the door and down the side into the drift. The next day, a welder from Nuksut came off a job and sat with me in the galley. He stared at my hands and asked if the man had asked for small ones. I said yes. He told me about a story his grandfather told him about an Ijirak. He said if you look full on, it looks wrong, but your brain tries to help, and that's when you get turned around and taken. He said they get bored. He said some wear a shape that smells like old blood and battery acid. He said never answer when it knows your name. He talked soft, kept his eyes on his plate, and wouldn't repeat himself. On the 7th night, it just stopped. No door, no voice, nothing. We finished the week, shut the valve heaters down for scheduled work, and rotated south. I put in for a transfer to the road crew by the Yukon and got it. A month later, I heard our old pad was closed and said, pending upgrades. The men who vanished never came back. I heard one of the families got a letter about a work-related relocation. Also, the 2 unmarked men showed up once more to collect the hard hat and the Connex door. They told the day boss to sign a paper. Now I work closer to trees and towns. My wife sets coffee by the door before I leave in the morning, and sometimes I stand there not wanting to go outside. I know you get wild stories, and I'm trying to tell you this in sequence. A man came into our trailer. He said our names, and people went missing. It was one of the most horrifying experiences I've ever encountered. In this next story, a woman from a remote Alaska island recounts nights when something evil came to her family's house. She describes how the village elders trapped it and sank it in the channel, but sometimes the silhouette would return and be seen on the shoreline. Make sure you sit down and strap in for this terrifying tale. Hi, Weird Encounters. Thank you for giving me a place to tell this. I grew up on a small island in Alaska. We were a few miles from the village, at a cove with a single road that washed out during storms. We had a generator, a VHF radio, a wood stove, and a line of spruce between us and the beach. This happened in late November. The wind had moved in heavy from the southeast. Dark by 4 in the afternoon, cold that held in your clothes. Tide ranges were big. Kelp piled in mats along the stones. Our closest neighbor was a 1/4 mile by skiff. It started with footsteps on the porch boards after midnight. 3 steps, a pause, 3 more. My father opened the door and hit the light. No one was there. The yard had prints across the moss and gravel. Bare feet, narrow and long with a bend at the toes I had not seen before. The steps went from the beach to the porch and then stopped at the top stair. No steps away. The generator sounded strong and then dropped for a second before catching again. The air had a sour note, not fish and not diesel. My mother said to lock the door, and we did. The next night, there were fish heads set in a line from the woods to the threshold. Chum. Clean cut at the neck. Eyes turned toward the door. Something had tied the door latch with wet grass in a knot that held tight until my father cut it. He said he felt watch the entire time he worked the blade under the knot. I watched the tree line with the flashlight and saw no movement. No owl sound, no branch noise. The stillness did not feel normal. I felt sick to my stomach for no reason. Night 3. Something moved under the eaves. We heard a slow hand run along the siding. The house is old cedar. The sound was a dry scrape. My mother called the village on VHF and used the family code. 2 men from town and an older woman came by skiff. They carried spruce boughs, devil's club branches, and a small tin of red powder mixed with ash. The older woman asked to walk the house alone before dark. She looked at the tracks, at the fish heads, at a mark on the doorframe that we had missed. It was a circle with short lines across it and an upside-down star, fresh and cut into the wood. Her face changed when she saw it. She would not say a name. She said it was old trouble that comes with the first big storms. She told us to keep our names out of the air after midnight. She burned spruce boughs and brushed the smoke along the windows and doors. She rubbed the red powder and ash across the threshold and down the porch posts. She tied small bundles of devil's club under the eaves. She told us to keep a shallow bowl of clean water in each corner of the house and not to throw it out until morning. She told us to answer no voices outside the walls. The wind picked up after dark and held steady. Around 1 a.m, a voice called to me from the beach and used my mother's voice. It said my first name and asked me to open the door because the latch was stuck. My mother was in the chair by the stove. She heard it too. The voice used the right words, but the breath was wrong. The timing was off. We did not move. The voice tried my father's voice next, and then my brother's. It knocked on the door, not hard. Single taps. It said my name again and promised not to come inside if we would just talk. The smell in the room changed. There was a cold, wet smell that filled the throat. My father kept his hand on the rifle. None of us answered. The knocking stopped. We heard steps on the porch and then on the roof and then nothing. In the morning, we found thin scratches across the window glass. Not deep. 5 lines, even spacing. The fish heads were gone. Day 4, more people came. Men and women from the village. They did not treat this like a story. They worked fast and serious. They laid a line of stones in a ring around the yard and put a cedar carving at the gate. They burned spruce and devil's club. They spoke in low voices. No one used a name. They asked us to say only we or us after dark. An elder said a thing lived on the shoals when the tide moved strong, and that it walked when storms hit and when people said the wrong things at night. He would not say more. He told us to keep the rifles ready, but not to fire unless the house was crossed. Night 4, the air dropped colder. The house was silent except for the stove. At 2 a.m, a face appeared in the window by the sink. It pressed to the glass until the skin flattened. The skin had a gray cast without frost. The eyes were very dark and too open. The lids did not close. The mouth moved in a slow chew. The jaw clicked. It smiled without moving the rest of the face. I stepped sideways and it tracked the movement exactly. The smile went away. The mouth stretched wider and held. The teeth looked thin and crowded. It whispered my first name in my ear while it stood outside the glass. I felt warm breath near my ear, but no one stood near me. I did not answer. My father raised the rifle and the face slid out of the frame in a straight line. No bounce. The yard was still. The devil's club bundles rattled once on the eaves and then stopped. In the morning, we found small knots of hair tied around the porch rail in even spaces. Not ours. Short and coarse. There were prints in the moss by the well. The toes looked long. The heel mark was deep. The stride was wrong. No normal step would set that far. The older woman took the hair knots and burned them in a metal pan with spruce needles and said a few words in her language. She did not translate. She said it would try again before it gave up. On the 5th night, they made a plan. The tide chart showed a late high tide with a strong ebb that would pull straight out of the cove into deep water. The men made a net from heavy line and old gear. They tied lead and stones to the bottom. They rubbed the crossings with spruce smoke and ash. They set it on poles near the shoreline. They put a small lamp with seal oil on a rock and left a strip of dry fish near it. They asked us to stay inside the ring of stones and not to speak. They stood in a half circle with paddles and rifles, both ready. Right after 1 a.m, the smell came first. Cold, wet metal. The lamp flame bent once and stood straight again. Something stood at the edge of the water, not tall and not short, narrow through the shoulders, arms long. The head turned more than a neck should. It looked toward the house and then back to the water. It took one step onto the stones. The elders began a low chant with a steady beat from the paddles. They did not shout. They did not rush. They moved with the tide pull. When it reached for the fish, they dropped the poles and the net over it fast and pulled the lines tight. It did not fight in a way I expected. The body went loose and then hard, loose and then hard, in pulses. The mouth opened very wide and stayed open. It used 3 voices at once. I heard my mother's voice, my father's voice, and a high, thin voice that did not belong. The words were out of order. The faces standing closest to it went pale. One man gagged into the sand. The thing's hands worked fast at the knots with a twitch in each finger. The older woman pressed Devil's Club against the mesh and the hand stopped moving. The mouth kept opening and closing without breath. They dragged it to the skiff. It was heavy without bulk. The net held. We carried it down with 4 people on each line. I stayed on the shore and held the lamp. The men rowed out to the point where the ebb pulled hard. They did not talk. They tied more stones to the bottom knots and lowered it into the channel. It sank without bubbles. The water went flat. The wind eased for a moment, then regular wind again. The men came back in. No one cheered. The older woman told us to keep the house quiet and the lights low for 3 nights. She told us not to say where we had put it. She told us to keep the stones in the ring for a whole moon, even if someone said to move them. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The generator held steady. No prints, no smells. People came by with food and checked the stones and the bundles on the eaves. We slept in shifts. We kept a rifle under each window. Then, one night near the end of December, I woke up without a sound. I do not know why. I went to the window that faces the beach. The tide was low. The sky was clear. The moon was up. A figure stood at the waterline, just beyond the last line of kelp. A clean silhouette. Shoulders narrow. Head turned toward the channel. It did not move. It did not come closer. I watched for a long time. My father woke and stood behind me with the rifle. We did not speak. We stood until the tide started to move. When I blinked, the shape was gone. No splash. No step. We told no one that part for a while. When we finally did, the older woman said it was not a return. She said sometimes a shadow stays after a thing is handled. She said not to answer it even if it called. We never heard a voice after that night. We kept the stones down until spring and burned fresh spruce every new moon. Then we moved to a different house on another side of the island. We took the cedar carving with us. There was no report, no troopers, no Coast Guard. Mock feel unsteady. Years later, when the wind hits a certain way, I still smell that cold, wet metal smell. It makes my stomach feel unsteady. I check the shoreline and count the stones without counting out loud, and I keep the Devil's Club bundles up every winter. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.